When we come back, not your typical distressed property. We're going to take you on a tour of a Palm Beach mansion that was once owned by the Kennedy family and has now been scooped up by a noted investor. More on that in just a minute. A president, Palm Beach, and a distressed investor. It could sound like the start of a joke, but it may be a solid investment. Our chief national correspondent, Carol Masser, got the plum assignment of figuring out just how great. Carol.
Hi, Deirdre. No joke at all. John Castle, not a household name, and I think that's just fine with him. His property, though, in Palm Beach, Florida, used to be home to a very well-known family, the Kennedys. It's full of history and priceless memories.
It's known as the Winter White House, an idyllic oceanfront home in Palm Beach, Florida, bought by the Kennedy patriarch Joe Kennedy in 1933, where the entire Kennedy clan soaked up the sun, and a haven for President John F. Kennedy and his family during his years in the White House. Now it's home to distressed investor John Castle.
The first time you came to this house, what did you think? What was your initial thought?
Well, I always thought it was a beautiful place, a wonderful home, magnificent view, and of course, it's also got so much history. The fact that the president spent huge amounts of time here. Right at the location of this chair, Jack Kennedy worked on his inaugural address. That's not what your country can do for you.
Ask what you can do for your country.
John Castle is chairman of New York-based investment firm Castle Harlan. He fell in love with the Winter White House back in 1995.
The Kennedy family owned the house for 62 years.
Was it $100,000? Something like that?
You know, I have seen many different reports saying different figures, but approximately $100,000.
Can I ask you what you paid the house?
I think it was $4,920,000, and then we paid $80,000 for the furnishings, so it was $5 million.
And you put a lot of money into it.
That's right.
The home had been on the market for 18 months, and many of the locals called it a teardown. But much like his business skills of snapping up distressed companies, Castle saw the value right away. And it's what's inside the house that makes it even more valuable. Original furniture, the president's massage table, dressing room drawers with the original labels in Rose Kennedy's handwriting.
This was the den. Jack Kennedy interviewed his entire cabinet in this room. These 4 chairs are original, and the president would sit in that chair. This is the living room where they spent many, many evenings, apparently. And there's even tales of, in the living room of Frank Sinatra, Ted Kennedy, and other members singing at the piano. This room is what I would consider to be particularly special because it's the president's bedroom.
You're a Republican, I believe.
Yes.
What does it feel like to be in a storied house of a well-known Democratic family?
Well, it's, I can live with it. I can
There's no
accept
ghosts?
it. There's no ghosts.
Well, as you heard, John Castle bought the Kennedy Winter White House for just under $5 million, which he called a reasonable deal. Estimates for what it's worth today run from $28 to $35 million. Yet another indication of how astute an investor John Castle is, even when it comes to real estate. Now, coming up in the next hour, more on the man behind the investment. We'll have a closer look at distressed investor John Castle. Deirdre.
Hey, Carol, just quickly before we let you go, when you were walking through the house, what was the most amazing or notable thing you saw?
You're going to laugh, but I found it really interesting to be in what used to be Rose Kennedy's dressing room and to see her drawers, and they were labeled with her hand-printed writing of what was in those drawers, and he preserved that. I thought that was kind of cool to actually see that.
Yeah, and it was also nice to know he, in normal circumstances, supports the other side of the aisle. Just a good little piece of trivia you had in your report, Carol. Thank you. Our chief national correspondent, Carol Masser.
He's not a household name, but he is well known in the world of distressed investing. Bloomberg's chief national correspondent Carol Masser joins us with more, and we are talking about
John Castle. Yes. And as you mentioned, Mark, he is well known and successful. John Castle has raised billions of dollars, invested in nearly 200 companies globally, and returned on average more than 20% annually to his investors.
John Castle is an adventurer.
This was taken when we had just completed our circumnavigation of the Earth.
Crossed much of Siberia, been to the base camp at Mount Everest, and gone to the North and South Poles.
We think we've got it kind of put together.
But at heart, he's a businessman. After getting an MBA at Harvard, Castle headed to Wall Street, where he rose to become president of Donaldson, Lufkin & Jenrette, and a pioneer in the creation of private equity limited partnerships.
There was a real need and an opportunity to take some of the money from pension funds and other places of that nature and deploy it in the private markets.
Castle went out on his own in 1987. His strategy was to invest in little-known firms such as truck components that made brake drums for 18-wheelers. Castle made more than 5 times on his investment. Now he buys mid-sized companies and stays away from flashy deals. Castle may look at 1,000 transactions over 3 years, pulling the trigger on less than 10, doing lots of research along the way. Even so, not everything goes as planned, like Castle's purchase of Sharon Steel.
We had a blast furnace, and we were making steel in western Pennsylvania, and it just never kind of worked.
What has worked is investments in restaurants, McCormick & Schmick's, and Morton's. He likes them because they're cheap.
You also have the ability, if you come up with a really good concept, sometimes you can buy a concept that has 10 restaurants, and you can build it into to many more. Morton's was an example.
Castle bought Morton's twice, beating out billionaire investor Carl Icahn the second time around, taking it public in between and selling it earlier this year. Castle invests in what he knows, kind of like another successful investor, Warren Buffett, who also stays away from companies he doesn't understand.
I watch a lot of things, but I don't know anything about Groupon, LinkedIn. I do have my iPad now, and I use that to monitor what's going on in you know, my emails and things of that nature. But I'm really not an expert in those areas, and I really don't understand
Well, not so keen about the social media world. One regret of his, not making more investments during the financial crisis. He thinks in hindsight that it was a very good period to pursue investments, and his firm did do some things. He just says that they probably could have done even more. One last thing, Mark, I want to point out, Castle Harlan is very positive and focused on the oil services area. They recently made $1 billion acquisition. They bought 38 offshore drilling rigs, so that's kind of where he's been focusing some of his efforts as of late.
Seems like a man who's enjoying his life.
I think he is. He definitely doesn't waste any time. He's been all over, as you could see, exploring.
Wow. Carol Massar. Thank you, Carol, so much.